Join us as we delve into the 15 most dangerous cartels and gangs in the world.
The Zetas have moved in. They are Mexico's most violent, most depraved, most feared crime cartel. Among them, the notorious Oscar Manuel Bernal, also known as the Spider.
In the world of organized crime, some cartels and gangs stand out for their sheer brutality and influence. They operate with a level of violence and sophistication that makes them feared across the globe. What has made these cartels so infamous? And what are the secrets behind their violent tactics? Number 15, Los Zetas. To start with, let's take you by the hand into the dangerous world of Los Zetas. Known for their terrifying reputation, Los Zetas are one of Mexico's most feared and dangerous criminal groups. They gained their terrifying reputation through extreme violence, including beheadings, torture, and random killings. While they were mainly focused on drug trafficking, they also made money from illegal activities and gun rackets. On top of that, they were also involved in protection rackets, assassinations, extortion, and kidnappings. The cartel started in 1997 when a group of elite soldiers from the Mexican army left their posts. These well-trained soldiers quit the army and created the Los Zetas cartel.
It's stressed that this is another criminal organization that is a rival to the Zetas.
Initially, they worked as enforcers for the Gulf Cartel, but quickly built their criminal empire after their former leader was captured. Los Zetas were notorious for their military-like precision and extreme violence, including the shocking massacre of 72 migrants in 2010. Not only that, their influence grew beyond Mexico, reaching into Central America and even parts of Europe and Africa. At their peak, Los Zetas was one of Mexico's largest and most widespread drug cartels. Their advanced skills and brutal methods made them a powerful force. Even with their power, the United States and Mexican law enforcement made notable strides in breaking up their operations. One major blow came from a joint investigation known as Operation Blackjack. In a major operation involving the ATF, DEA, and FBI, authorities discovered 3 safe houses used by Los Zetas in Mexico. Mexican federal forces raided these locations, freeing over 40 people who had been kidnapped and confiscating a massive stockpile of weapons. This seizure included 540 rifles, 287 hand grenades, and 500,000 rounds of ammunition, along with other military gear. In October 2008, the FBI warned that a Los Zetas cell in Texas would aggressively resist any law enforcement attempts to intervene. The cell leader, Jaime Gonzalez Duran, was captured on November 7, 2008, in Reynosa, Tamaulipas. In response to the Zetas' threats, Texas Governor Rick Perry announced the Operation Border Star Contingency Plan in February 2009.
What this looks like, it's an operation that was very well carried out.
The plan was designed to secure the border using tanks, planes, and the National Guard, preparing for potential attacks and an influx of Mexican refugees escaping the violence. In 2012, the Obama administration took additional steps by imposing sanctions on Los Zetas, listing them as one of the top 4 international crime groups. Despite efforts to combat Los Zetas, United States funding to Mexico has been limited. The Mérida Initiative promised $1.4 billion over 3 years, but delivered little, with additional limited support from the Obama administration. Criticism also arose over the PRI government's failure to address human rights issues, allowing Los Zetas to persist in spreading fear. By 2017, Los Zetas controlled around 40% of Mexico's oil market and extended their influence globally through trafficking, human smuggling, and fentanyl distribution. Their reach also includes infiltration of prison systems in several Western countries, where they use threats and violence to control inmates and incite riots. Number 14, CJNG, Jalisco New Generation Cartel. Formed in 2009, the CJNG cartels quickly made a name for themselves in Mexico with their shocking violence, with some even saying their brutality goes as far as cannibalism. They run their operations like a tight military unit, making them both organized and effective. But their reach isn't limited to Mexico. They have spread their influence into Central America, the United States, and even Australia. With a strong hold on Mexico's drug trade and access to cutting-edge technology, the CJNG remains a powerful and dangerous force in the criminal world. Within just 6 months, CJNG had expanded its operations across Mexico, making it one of the most formidable criminal groups by 2012. This rapid growth was accompanied by a rise in violence,
This was not a random eruption of violence or rival crime groups fighting over turf.
including homicides, kidnappings, and the discovery of mass graves in Jalisco. What makes the CJNG different from other cartels is their military-like approach to crime. The CJNG stands out because of its advanced crime tactics. They go as far as using high-tech devices and weapons like drones and rocket-propelled grenades during their attacks, and put their hitmen through homicides training. By 2018, CJNG had established over 100 meth labs across Mexico, turning trafficking into a highly profitable business, with billions in annual earnings from and crystal meth. Their criminal reach extended far beyond Mexico, challenging other criminal groups for control of key territories in Central America, the United States, and even Australia. The CJNG cartel is notorious for its violence, marked by a series of brutal incidents that demonstrated their ruthless tactics. A brutal example was in 2011, when they left 7 bodies in a truck in Veracruz and attacked public buses, killing 16 people, including 3 Americans. More discoveries followed, including handcuffed and tortured victims. The Mexican government tried to respond with Operation Veracruz, which reduced the homicide rate temporarily, but violence persisted. Their aggression didn't stop at Mexico's borders. In 2012, 3 photojournalists were killed in Veracruz, and in Sinaloa, 26 bodies were found in abandoned vehicles, some burned alive with no mercy. The CJNG's brutal tactics came into the spotlight in 2015, when they launched a deadly ambush on Mexican police officers, leaving 15 officers dead.
Like many modern cartels, the CJNG got their start with the destruction of another older cartel.
Just when it seemed like the CJNG cartel's violence couldn't get any worse, they hit the headlines again in 2018 by throwing grenades at the United States consulate in Guadalajara, proving just how extreme their actions can be. Even with their stronghold on trafficking, the CJNG cartel faced some serious setbacks. In the early 2020, a massive DEA crackdown led to the arrest of 700 of their members and the seizure of $20 million. As if that wasn't enough, later that year, Mexico's Financial Intelligence Unit froze a staggering $1.1 billion in cartel assets. But the CJNG's troubles were far from over. They faced fierce competition from smaller cartels and rival groups, and their attempts to knock out their enemies, like the assassination of Mexico City Police Chief Omar Garcia Harfuch, only show the intense conflict. By 2020, the CJNG had become a serious concern in both Mexico and the United States. Number 13, Aryan Brotherhood.
They call themselves the Aryan Brotherhood of Texas, the ABT, considered one of the most dangerous gangs in the state.
The Aryan Brotherhood quickly rose to become the first big white supremacist prison gang in the United States. It all started with a group of Irish bikers who originally called themselves the Diamond Tooth Gang because they wore shards of glass in their teeth. To become a member, a person has to prove their loyalty by committing a serious violent act, like attacking a rival gang member or hitting a prison guard. This tough initiation matches the gang's motto, blood in, blood out, meaning you can only leave the gang by dying. In the 1960s, as prisons started to mix black and white inmates, tensions rose and fights began. It was in this heated atmosphere that the Aryan Brotherhood was formed at San Quentin State Prison in California in 1964. The gang now has between 15,000 to 20,000 members both inside and outside of prisons. It was created to protect against a violent black gang called the Black Guerrilla Family. Today, the Aryan Brotherhood operates both inside and outside of prisons. In the 1970s, as the Aryan Brotherhood rapidly expanded within California's prison system, tensions boiled over into a race war. The gang often clashed with other prison groups like La Nuestra Familia and the Black Guerrilla Family. These violent confrontations led California prison officials to separate the gangs by placing them in different facilities to prevent further conflict. When the Aryan Brotherhood was moved to Chino Prison, they used their isolation as an opportunity to strengthen their cartel. By 1981, their violent reputation became even more pronounced. Thomas Silverstein and Clayton Fountain were charged with murdering Robert Chappelle, a black inmate, at the United States Penitentiary in Marion. Chappelle was strangled in his cell, and Silverstein and Fountain followed up by brutally stabbing Raymond Smith, Chappelle's friend, 67 times. Silverstein then went ahead to target prison officers. On October 22, 1983, these Aryan Brotherhood members killed 2 officers at Marion. Silverstein attacked Officer Merle Klutz and stabbed him 40 times, while Fountain similarly killed Officer Robert Hoffman. They used homemade knives and handcuff keys to escape and carry out their attacks. In the 1990s, the Aryan Brotherhood shifted from focusing on racial violence to switching to organized crime. By the early 1990s, the Aryan Brotherhood was deeply involved in drug dealing, prostitution, and planned murders, which gave them a lot of power in the prison system. Their influence became obvious in April 1993 during the Lucasville prison riot. They teamed up with Black Muslims and other gangs to start a major uprising at the Southern Ohio Correctional Facility. The chaos led to several officers being taken hostage and resulted in the deaths of 9 inmates and 1 officer. This violent outburst was sparked by complaints about mistreatment, overcrowding, and demands for religious freedoms. By 1996, the Aryan Brotherhood's power was so strong that even John Gotti, the boss of the Gambino crime family, reportedly asked for their help after an inmate attacked him at Marion Federal Penitentiary. But when the attacker was moved to protective custody, the revenge plan fell apart. In late 2002, authorities cracked down on the gang, arresting 29 top leaders from prisons nationwide. Despite aiming for death sentences for some, only 30 members were convicted, with no top leaders receiving the death penalty. Prosecuting the gang was tough since many members were already serving life sentences. Number 12, MS-13, Mara Salvatrucha. MS-13 is a gang that originated in Los Angeles, primarily formed by immigrant families who had fled the brutal civil war in El Salvador.
El Salvador's decades-long battle with gangs has its origins in the civil war that tore the country apart in the 1980s.
However, with the changes in the city, which was seeing a lot of new immigration, these families felt the need to band together. They wanted to create a strong group to face the other immigrant communities around them, mainly Mexican Americans. In those early days, the gang was heavily influenced by heavy metal music. Think bands like DC and Iron Maiden, with their intense guitar riffs and pounding drums. Members sported long hair and ripped jeans, reflecting their passion for this music genre. Los Angeles, often called the City of Angels, was far from angelic beneath its glamorous exterior. At that time, the city was grappling with high levels of violence and gang activity. It had one of the worst gang problems in the country, with hundreds of gangs operating across its landscape. As MS-13 began to establish itself in various neighborhoods within Los Angeles, their influence grew. Over time, they expanded their reach to other cities across the United States. As of today, MS-13 is deeply involved in drug dealing, gun trafficking, human smuggling, extortion, and other illegal activities. Gang members of the MS-13 are often poor young men and teenagers who might be homeless and cut off from their families. They typically make money through small-scale drug dealing, theft, and shaking down street vendors and other small-time crooks. Many MS-13 gang members live in rundown buildings, which they call destroyers. These places are where they not only live, but also hold secret meetings and parties and conduct drug deals. When they do work legitimate jobs, it's usually in construction, restaurants, delivery services, or landscaping, often using fake IDs to get hired. Their violence is notorious, especially in El Salvador, where the gang is heavily active. Globally, the country has one of the highest rates of femicide, which means the killing of women. In 2016, 1 in 5,000 Salvadoran women was murdered, and only a tiny fraction of these cases led to convictions. MS-13 doesn't just target rival gangs. They also go after their own members' families, friends, and entire neighborhoods. They have been known to set fire to buses with people inside and attack police officers, government officials, and community groups. Some of the most violent MS-13 members have even been recruited by the Sinaloa cartel to fight against rival gangs like Los Zetas in Mexico. Their actions have caught the attention of the FBI and United States Immigration and Customs Enforcement, leading to major raids and hundreds of arrests across the United States. Number 11, Yakuza. The Yakuza, Japan's organized crime group, sticks to a strict code of honor, but is heavily involved in crime, including drug dealing, extortion, and loan sharking. They may not have made headlines for violence like other gangs, but their grip on legal businesses and their strong presence both in Japan and abroad make them very powerful. Easily identified by their distinctive tattoos and traditional samurai-inspired customs, the Yakuza have broadened their influence beyond Japan's borders. Their reach now extends to Western countries, including the United States. They are involved in many illegal activities in Japan, such as blackmail, smuggling, prostitution, drug trafficking, gambling, and loan sharking. But their influence isn't limited to just criminal enterprises. The Yakuza also runs many legitimate businesses in Japan, including restaurants, bars, trucking companies, talent agencies, and large factories. Figuring out their exact origins is tricky, but historians think they might have come from masterless samurai, known as ronin, who turned to crime, or from the noble warriors who fought against them in the early 17th century. By the 1960s, the Yakuza had grown into a massive organization with over 180,000 members. Despite their criminal activities, the Yakuza have also done some charitable work. For instance, in 1995, they donated supplies to victims of the Kobe earthquake, and in 2011, they helped those affected by the Japan earthquake and tsunami. Recently, the Yakuza have shifted their focus to a specific type of fraud that targets elderly people. This scam involves tricking elderly people by calling them at home and pretending to be their children asking for money. It also includes visiting them in person while pretending to be bank employees to steal their savings. In 2014, this type of fraud, known as tokushu sagi, became a major source of income for the Yakuza, making up 10.4% of all Yakuza-related arrests and surpassing theft for the first time. By that year, around 34.6% of those arrested for this fraud were linked to the Yakuza. The total losses from tokushu sagi in 2019 reached over 30 billion yen. Number 10. Crips. The Crips emerged from south-central Los Angeles in the late 1960s.
Thai police arrested a 72-year-old former Yakuza gang member,
Founded by Stanley Tookie Williams and Raymond Lee Washington. Known for their distinctive display of their blue bandanas and involvement in drug trafficking, the Crips have expanded their influence across the United States. Their violence, including deadly infighting and conflicts with the Bloods, solidifies their place among the most dangerous gangs. Like many street gangs, the Crips have made money through various illegal activities. These include illegal gambling, drug dealing, pimping, theft, and robbery. They also extort local drug dealers who aren't part of their gang. Besides these profitable crimes, the Crips engage in vandalism and property damage, often for gang pride or just for fun. This includes tagging buildings with graffiti and joyriding in stolen cars. As we speak, the Crips primarily earn money from street-level drug sales. They also make profits from selling illegal firearms on the black market. In the 1980s, the Crips' power and size expanded due to the crack cocaine trade. During this period, their influence spread throughout southern Los Angeles. As more youth gangs aligned with them, the Crips became so dominant that they outnumbered other gangs, leading to frequent clashes with rivals.
Are accused of 3 murders, 20 attempted murders, and shootings, among other crimes.
Number 9. Bloods. The Bloods gang began in the late 1960s due to a rivalry with the Crips. The trouble started when Raymond Washington, a leader of the Crips, attacked 2 high school students, Sylvester Scott and Benson Owens, from Centennial High School in Compton, California. To fight back, Scott created his own gang, the Peru Street Boys. Owens also started a rival gang called the West Peru Gang to stand up against the Crips. This marked the birth of the Bloods. Scott and Owens aimed to protect those who were not affiliated with the Crips and to stand up against the bullying and control the Crips had over their community. Since many people outside the Crips already referred to themselves as Bloods, the name was a natural fit. Members of the Bloods gang use various symbols to identify themselves, including colors, clothing, and specific signs. The Bloods' main color is red, which they display through their clothing, especially their bandanas and sportswears. This gang also have distinctive symbols that represent their identity and unity. The key symbols for the Bloods include the number 5, a 5-pointed star, and a 5-pointed crown. These symbols represent their affiliation with the People Nation, a coalition formed to protect its members in prison. You will see these symbols on their tattoos, jewelry, and clothing, as well as in the graffiti they use to mark their territory. Bloods graffiti often features their gang names, nicknames, and declarations of loyalty. It might also include threats against rival gangs or details of criminal activities they've been involved in.
My name is Skip Townsend. I'm a former member of the Rolling 20 Avenue Bloods out of LA, and I was active for over 27 years.
To insult their rivals, particularly the Crips, Bloods may draw Crips symbols upside down. Their communication style further distinguishes them from other gangs. Bloods greet each other with the word blood, and typically avoid using words with the letter C, which they associate with their rivals. They use hand signs for communication, ranging from single gestures, like the American Sign Language letter B, to to a more complex series of movements with one or both hands. New gang members often receive a distinctive mark. This mark is a dog paw symbol made of 3 dots, which is sometimes burned onto the right shoulder with a cigarette. Other symbols associated with the Bloods include images of a bulldog and a bull. However, Bloods first captured widespread attention on March 21, 1972, when they attacked and robbed a young boy named Robert Ballou Jr. outside the Hollywood Palladium. Ballou was beaten to death while trying to defend his leather jacket, and this disturbing event drew significant media coverage. By the 1980s, the Bloods had established themselves as a major force in drug trafficking, earning millions from illegal drugs. At that time, they also divided into 2 main factions, the West Coast Bloods and the East Coast Bloods, also known as the United Bloods Nation. Number 8. Russian Mafia. Unlike street gangs like the Bloods and Crips, the Russian Mafia works on a much bigger and more complex level. It began to take shape after World War II, during a time when Russia was in chaos following the fall of the Soviet Union. As Russia's government struggled to maintain control, armed gangs seized the opportunity to exploit the growing black market. With around 6,000 different gangs, they are involved in all sorts of illegal activities like human trafficking, drug dealing, extortion, and even high-profile murders. The Russian Mafia is also heavily involved in financial crimes and terrorism. Their expertise in manipulating governments and laundering money has been a key factor in their success. With over 500,000 members spread across more than 50 countries, they have amassed considerable power and wealth. Their rise to prominence has been fueled by violence, dubious deals, and a range of international criminal activities. By the 1990s, the Russian Mafia had risen to become a major concern for the FBI. Louis Freeh, who headed the FBI then, named them as one of the greatest threats to the United States during his tenure.
Head of the FBI for over 40 years. I don't see any evidence in this case that would justify.
Presently, the Russian Mafia is still one of the most feared and powerful criminal groups in the world. Despite many attempts to take them down, they remain a serious threat. Number 7. 18th Street Gang. The 18th Street Gang began in Los Angeles and has grown to 50,000 gang members spread across the United States, Mexico, and Central America. They work closely with the Mexican Mafia and are known for making the Northern Triangle in Central America one of the most dangerous places, with very high murder rates. The gang started in the 1960s when Mexican Americans and other immigrants had trouble joining the Hispanic gangs that were already there. After facing rejection from groups like the Clanton 14, these immigrants chose to start their own gangs. As the 18th Street Gang grew, they got involved in violent clashes with established Hispanic gangs, leading to losses. To overcome this, they broadened their membership to include people from various backgrounds, making them the first multi-ethnic gang in Los Angeles. Today, the 18th Street Gang operates through several independent sub-gangs, all under the 18th banner. Their criminal activities are vast and include drug trafficking, robbery, and more. On top of that, they have a strong presence in prisons, where they continue their history of violence and intimidation. Over time, their influence has expanded internationally, with branches in countries like Australia, Canada, England, Germany, and El Salvador. Number 6. Camorra. The Camorra is one of the oldest criminal organizations in the world. They have been involved in activities ranging from drug trafficking to money laundering and have had significant influence in both Italy and beyond. Despite crackdowns, their strong presence in the criminal world makes them a dangerous force. The story of the Camorra started with old stories linking it to secret groups from 16th century Spain and 19th century. But most experts agree that the Camorra began in the prisons of Naples before Italy became a unified country in 1861. When these prisoners were released, they took advantage of the chaos to control local elections and fund their power through crimes like robbing travelers and extorting money. In the 1920s, the fascist government cracked down hard on the Camorra and other gangs as part of a broader campaign against political opponents. By 1930, it seemed like the Camorra was finished, but some groups went into hiding, waiting for a chance to return. That chance came after World War II. After the Allied bombings wrecked much of Naples, the Camorra moved into the city's black markets, especially for food. In 1943, as Allied forces invaded Italy, the Camorra struck deals for protection and information, which helped them become powerful again. In the years after the war, the Camorra continued to grow. By the late 1960s, Naples had emerged as a key player in international tobacco smuggling. This growing prominence set the stage for the 1970s, when the Camorra's operations flourished, generating approximately $215 million each year and employing between 40,000 and 60,000 people across the Campania region. As the decade advanced, their ambitions shifted. The Camorra began to pour substantial resources into the illegal cocaine and heroin trade, transforming southern Italy into a major drug hub. The 1980s brought more violence, including the murder of important political figures and judges who opposed them. Raffaele Cutolo, a powerful boss, tried to unite the Camorra under his rule, but his efforts only caused more fighting and conflict within the gang. Throughout the 1990s, the police made many arrests to weaken the Camorra. However, these actions often created power gaps that new Camorra members quickly filled. Number 5. Latin Kings. A street gang called the Latin Kings appeared in Chicago around the 1970s. Initially, it was formed by Mexican and Puerto Rican young men who wanted to fight against the racial prejudice they faced. However, the group quickly turned into a full-fledged criminal organization. The Latin Kings are split into two main groups. One is known as the Motherland, also known as King Motherland Chicago, and the other is called Bloodline, based in New York. The Motherland group has grown to over 160 chapters, operating in 150 cities across 31 states in the United States. They are estimated to have between 20,000 to 35,000 members, making them one of Chicago's largest criminal gangs.
Amanda Domingo Peirano, former soldier of the Latin Kings.
Meanwhile, the Bloodline group in New York has between 2,200 to 7,500 members who are heavily armed and often involved in violent activities. Even though both groups are part of the same gang, they work separately. The New York branch does not report to the Chicago branch. Over the years, the Latin Kings have funded their activities through various illegal means, including drug distribution, robberies, money laundering, and financial fraud. They have formed alliances with other gangs like the Bloods, the Cali Cartel, and the Vice Lords. However, their criminal activities have also led to clashes with other gangs such as the Crips, Gangster Disciples, United Blood Nation, Los Zetas, and La Raza Nation. These confrontations often turn violent, contributing to the ongoing bloodshed in Chicago. Today, they are considered one of the most dangerous street gangs in the United States, with numerous murders and shootings connected to their activities every year. Number 4. Vice Lords. In the hidden and dangerous world of Chicago's underground, a notorious gang known as the Vice Lords is known for its violence. The gang started in 1957 with a group of young African-American men from North Lawndale in Chicago. They first came together while in the St. Charles Juvenile Correctional Facility. Led by Edwin Pepo Perry, the gang became powerful quickly. After getting out of prison, these leaders expanded their gang, bringing in more young boys and fighting with other gangs. By 1964, just 7 years after its inception, the Vice Lords had become a serious concern for law enforcement. Their members were notorious for their violence and criminal activities, which included armed robberies, car thefts, assaults, murders, gang shootings, and extortion. Seeking to improve their image, the gang rebranded themselves as the Conservative Vice Lords. Although this new name initially brought them some positive attention, the violence and criminal behavior continued. Despite receiving a $275,000 grant from the Rockefeller Foundation in 1970, the funds were ultimately diverted to support their illegal activities. Today, the Vice Lords have evolved into a more sophisticated organization, now involved in crimes such as mortgage fraud, credit card fraud, and money laundering. According to the Department of Justice, the gang operates in 74 cities across 28 states, with an estimated 30,000 to 35,000 gang members nationwide. Number 3. Dretta Mafia. The Dretta Mafia are one of Italy's oldest gangs, with their origins going back to the 18th century. They likely emerged as a reaction to the severe efforts against the Sicilian Mafia, also known as Cosa Nostra. Over the years, the Dretta have expanded their criminal activities to include money laundering, extortion, human trafficking, and tampering with public contracts. Their reach is extensive, and they've had high-profile individuals involved. For instance, former Italian lawmaker Giancarlo Pitelli was sentenced to 11 years in prison in 2023 for acting as a fixer for the gang. Interpol's Secretary General, Jürgen Stock, has called the Dretta Mafia one of the most dangerous criminal organizations globally. In response to their threat, Interpol established a special task force in 2021 to tackle their operations. The Drangheta are deeply involved in illegal arms trade and various other crimes, raking in billions of dollars each year. In 2008, the Italian research institute Eurus estimated their revenue at about 44 billion euros, which is roughly 3% of Italy's GDP. Interestingly, the gang also invests some of their money into struggling local businesses, though their motives are far from benevolent. Their influence has spread far beyond Italy, reaching countries like the United States, Canada, Latin America, and Australia. With approximately 10,000 members and over 60,000 affiliates worldwide, the 'Drangheta remains one of the most dangerous criminal organizations in Italy and beyond. Number 2. Hells Angels. A group of bikers in California came together to create their own gang, 1948, leading to the formation of the Hells Angels. From these early beginnings, the Hells Angels have grown to become the most famous motorcycle gang in the United States. Made up mostly of white men who ride Harley-Davidson bikes, the gang has built a reputation that's as much about their rough image as it is about their motorcycles. In 1954, they started their first chapter in San Francisco and expanded to Oakland in 1957, gradually spreading across the country. The low-budget biker movies of the 1960s and 70s helped to strengthen their tough image, portraying the Hells Angels as a gang deeply involved in violence, from stabbings and shootings to organized crime. Their criminal activities extend beyond street violence, as they have also been heavily involved in the illegal drug trade. Despite many efforts to hold them accountable for their crimes, including racketeering, the FBI continues to see them as a dangerous outlaw motorcycle gang. Number 1. Black Disciples. In 1958, a group of teenagers from Chicago's Hyde Park, Englewood, and Kenwood neighborhoods came together to form a gang called the Devil's Disciples. The founders included David Barksdale, Richard Strong, Mingo Shred, Kilroy, and Nightwalker, among others. By early 1961, David Barksdale, known as King David, took charge of the gang and began organizing it more systematically. He appointed members to oversee different parts of the city, aiming to expand the group's influence. David Barksdale's plan was to take over smaller gangs and turn them into parts of the Devil's Disciples. By 1966, he had set up the Black Disciples Nation to boost their numbers and strengthen their position against other gangs. This move greatly increased their membership. In 1969, a major shift happened when Larry Hoover, who led the rival Gangster Disciples, agreed to merge with Barksdale. This created the Black Gangster Disciples Nation. But soon after, Hoover and another member were convicted for murdering a fellow gang member and were given life sentences. This left Barksdale in charge until he died of kidney problems on September 2, 1974. After Barksdale's death, the gang split into two rival groups, the Black Gangster Disciples and the Black Disciples. Mickey Bull, a member of the Black Disciples, stepped up as leader and briefly made peace with the Gangster Disciples. However, this peace didn't last. In August 1991, Bull was killed by the Gangster Disciples, leading to the Black Disciples retaliating by killing 3 Gangster Disciples. The violence escalated from 1991 to 1994, but gang leader Marvel Thompson's efforts eventually helped reduce the tension. However, that same year, a tragic event brought unwanted attention to the Black Disciples. An 11-year-old member, Robert Yummy Sandifer, accidentally shot and killed a 14-year-old girl named Siobhan Dean. To cover up the crime, the gang ordered brothers Derek and Craig Hardaway to kill Yummy, which they did. This murder of a young member drew significant local and national media attention to the Black Disciples, despite their attempts to keep their activities hidden. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.